And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the Monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me as always is my good brother here in the temple, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix,
Hello.
who already baned me before we even started.
I'm good at doing that.
For those, because with his blurb that he put up on Twitter regarding the pre-stream, he talked about this being me pandering to myself, which is not inaccurate. And some of you may have seen that the opening music is a little bit different from the stuff I usually use. I'm probably going to get myself in trouble for using it, but I don't care. Because it is very rare that I focus on something that was so integral to my development when it came to understanding role-playing games and just game design as a whole. Now, something that we've talked about quite a bit is our issue with how people perceive fantasy, not just in games but in storytelling. Period.
Mm-hmm.
That being that a lot of people look at it as the British Isles kind of fantasy and go full stop with that. And I'd like to think that part of the reason I ended up latching onto console style RPGs at the age that I did is because of the fact that in a lot of those entries, you have a bigger variety of locales and biomes that you're seeing within that style of within the realm of fantasy. Which is why it's always a bit amusing when people talk about stuff like Final Fantasy or Tales having more high fantasy roots in the early days.
Yeah.
But that's something that we've covered. But for this week, instead of covering alternatives in that regard, this is going to be a bit of a look into a franchise that is near and dear to me. And given that kind of sentiment, this is not something that you're going to see often from me. So enjoy it while it lasts, people.
This is just him pandering to himself, like I said.
After 100 episodes, haven't I earned that?
I would counter, isn't the entire monastery pandering to yourself?
Well, we started with westerns and going past the 100 episodes. We're returning to it, in a sense, because for this week, the focus at hand is Wild Arms. What will instantly come to mind for me whenever I talk about a quote unquote Western RPG? Because Lord knows because where else are you? What's the closest thing you're going to get to a Western in RPG form? If any of you say Red Dead, get to the back of the line.
It's not even technically an RPG.
No, but I'm pretty sure someone's going to argue RPG elements.
Mm-hmm.
Have I mentioned I fucking hate that phrase?
We both do. A lot of games with built-in progression systems claim them to be RPG elements.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make it true.
But Wild Arms has been around in one form or another since 1996. And this is, of course, a very appropriate time to talk about the franchise, given the recent announcement of a spiritual successor on the way. Even if by on the way it's something that we're not going to see for a few years. On the way is still on the way.
Yes.
Now, I have seen some say that Wild Arms was Sony's first RPG entry. That is not true. The actual first is Ark the Lad, which may get its own spot of coverage down the road, but not today, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And Ark the Lad is its own unique set of circumstances. I'll put it like that, at least.
Arc the Lad is a fun set of games.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very fun combat systems all throughout.
Yeah, but obviously that's not the focus tonight. The I Now, because of the fact that there's not a whole lot of behind the scenes details as far as the early days of Wild Arms, um, all that I know is that the idea was mix the Western with the elements that had already been present with console style RPGs. I know some people might be annoyed with me using the phrase console style RPGs, but I've made it clear over the years I don't like the phrase JRPG.
Yeah, because after all, if we go by the literal definition of what makes a JRPG, that being that it was made in Japan, Dark Souls and Elden Ring and Bloodborne, they're all JRPGs. Don't you see how that definition falls apart at that point, people?
Well, let me go through the vicious cycle of JRPG definition. It's an RPG that's made in Japan. I refer to what Zan just said 5 seconds ago. Do those count? No. It's it has to have a manga leaning manga art style. You kind of have that with Septerra Core. Does that count? No. That doesn't count. That was made in the States. It's got to be made in Japan.
Yep.
And
by the way, I found it.
you found it.
Unrelated note: I both plagued myself and the monk by finding a screenshot of a game that looked interesting, and I was sure I had played it before. And I finally found the game, and yeah, I've played it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was. Were you able to find out about it by accident, or did the guy
Reverse
tell you?
Image search.
Oh.
I tweaked some of the variables on my reverse image search, and it came up with a bunch of YouTube videos about this game.
Well, now I do have to correct myself. The first Wild Arms came out in '96 in Japan, and on December 20th and April 30th, '97 in the U.S. and then a year later in Europe, because Europe always gets things last.
Mm-hmm.
And one particular theme that happens throughout the series is really bad timing, because Wild Arms was very good with this mix of Western and fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when it came to timing. I think I'd have to check the exact date, but I think a few months later was the North American release of Final Fantasy VII.
I can check that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So if we check the release dates for each, Wild Arms 1 released April 30th, 97 in North America, and Final Fantasy VII released September 7th, 1997. So yes, it's a few months between the two.
Yeah, and
It's less than a month. It's less than a month between the two Japanese releases, December 96 through to January 97.
mm-hmm. And when you take that into account, well, one was obviously going to have far more of a hype machine behind it.
Not to mention, due to the increasing exposure of Final Fantasy on the Super Nintendo in the West, there was already a cultural zeitgeist around Final Fantasy as a name.
But the other reason for poor timing is it's important to remember that the 90s had a 3D arms race going on.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was in a rush to jump on this whole 3D polygon thing as quick as they could, and anybody who was doing 2D sprite work was seen as quaint or outdated. A ridiculous concept nowadays, but this is why it's important to remember the mindset at the time.
It's important to remember your history.
Mm-hmm. And Wild Arms, while it had only had polygons for combat scenes, and even then the character models that were utilized was more of the big head style abstraction rather than the more quote unquote realistic proportional setup that FF7 had for its battle scenes.
Yeah, the deformed big head stuff was usually relegated to your map sprites.
Mm-hmm. Now,
At least in FF7.
Yeah, and of course the other issue is aside from battles, it was still 2D sprite work.
Mm-hmm.
Which nothing wrong with that, but when one of them is pushing the boundaries of what you can do with 3D at the time when everybody's rushing towards this whole 3D thing,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where 3D was used in a bunch of titles as a selling point.
Yeah.
That's
well.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we have to remember the development cycles of these games, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's very likely Wild Arms was still being developed before 3D technology had really gotten its legs. And so all the sprite work was likely done, finished, fleshed out. And then the 3D arms race starts, and they go, well, we got to have 3D somewhere, I guess. But it's not like they could scrap all the assets they had already made to just change the game to 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So bad timing is all around this.
What I was able to dig up regarding the early days is that obviously the whole franchise was developed by Media.Vision, which the studio was the studio was founded in '93, and their previous work was Tenshi no Uta, which was a series that was on the PC Engine.
Mm-hmm.
Which
so nothing any of us in the West would have ever gotten.
No, although the blurb I've been able to find about Tenshi no Uta, maybe we should take a look. If somebody's translated it, maybe I'll take a look at it, because it talks about having a Celtic mythology motif.
Interesting, considering that the name of the if it's the kanji, I think it is, the name of that game is Angel's Song.
Well, let um according to the wiki, here's the kanji. I'm
Which
sent
should be
sent
really
that.
easy to tell. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah, they did three games of that. Apparently, the third game had some people from Wolf Team working on it.
Hmm.
There what it talks about that there was a fan translation.
Yeah. So
Uh,
this definitely does mean Song of the Angel
mhm.
or Angel's Song, or if you want to use more esoteric meanings for the same kanji, poem, poetry, verse, but still same idea.
Yeah. Um, but I'd say the prototype for Wild Arms was actually Gunner's Heaven or Rapid Reload, which MediaVision released a year beforehand.
Hmm.
I say it's a prototype because a lot of the people who would work on Wild Arms in production or character design would work on Gunner's Heaven. Uh,
And it's compared to Gunstar Heroes, so nice.
mhm. I do remember playing Gunner's Heaven once, but it is very much a 2D run and gun.
Hmm.
But you look at, say, the cover for it, or as it was known in Japan, Rapid Reload, and tell me it doesn't look like Rudy
Well,
Rough Knight.
other way around. Rapid Reload in the
Yeah.
U.S.
Ah.
But no, you're not wrong. Um, I'm like, I wonder why Wild Arms characters starring in this non-Wild Arms game.
And yeah, looking at the gameplay setup, um, I could. I know it says that it's reminiscent of Gunstar Heroes, but I on a whim I looked at a few clips. I'd hesitate to call this a resemblance. It's almost like a Gunstar Heroes ripoff.
I said it was often compared to. I never said that it wasn't a ripoff.
Yeah, obviously that's going a little bit too far because it is a little bit more. Gunner's Heaven is a little bit more consistent with its visual style.
Hmm.
It is far. I'd say it's far more diesel punk, but you can still kind of see the DNA of what would come.
Hmm.
Just not just mostly in visual design rather than in gameplay.
Yeah. Now, something I would like to note briefly about Media Vision is other people might know some of the games that they've made besides Wild Arms. Things such as the Valkyria Chronicles games, at least from Valkyria Chronicles 3 on.
Hmm.
Things like Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, and some of the later Summon Night games like Summon Night 6.
Which.
So they've been branching out for sure.
Hmm. And even do I do remember hearing about the. I know that they're responsible for the Chaos Rings games, which seemed interesting, but they were but mobile games, so you know how I feel about that.
It eventually got onto the Vita, but yes, I understand.
Hmm.
But sure, MediaVision has a very small gameplay or game portfolio. In fact, the last thing they made was Valkyria Chronicles 4. And that was, well, 4 years ago.
Hmm. They were it's apparently they were a helper studio on that, so I think that's kind of the spot that they've put themselves in the years since.
Yeah. Also, something hilarious. MediaVision was founded in 1993 by former members of Riot. No, not the Riot Games you're thinking of, but an earlier company that was a subsidiary of Telnet Japan. So today's Riot Games, not as good as some people from 1993. Did I say that out loud?
Hmm.
But yeah, Gunner's Heaven is definite. It's definitely a thing where you can see the character at the very least is something that influenced Wild Arms, and maybe even the fact that there was guns in it. But I think it's about as far as Gunner's Heaven might go with its influence on Wild Arms.
Yeah. Al- Also about but one of the other things that stood out to me and even still stands out is Wild Arms has had the habit of having a anime like opening whenever you're loading your save or just loading the game up for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And that animated sequence, which a lot of games were doing that whole thing of using anime FMVs. Oh,
Yeah.
this was done by Madhouse.
Yep. We've mentioned that before on other episodes. Madhouse has done a lot of things for a lot of things. In
Hmm.
fact, though we still describe everything as the Madhouse curse, Thaj, um, Madhouse has absolutely done a massive amount of work for many different pieces of media, and Wild Arms is no exception to that.
Hmm. And when it comes what's important to bring up when it comes to the first game is just the establishment of certain traditions. Um, One of them being the the long-eared demi-humans known as the Elu,
Mm-hmm.
who often appear as the ancients or their equivalents, but but also the fact that the villainous faction is usually a team of generals and a commander, almost like a Sentai villain team. And usually there's a significant technological difference, either being diesel punk or straight up science fiction level tech on the villain side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the bigger themes is that of Filgaia itself, which is described as in some cases Filgaia is described as a apocalyptic wasteland. In some cases a dying world. In a lot of cases, a lot of desert. But I would hesitate to call it a post-apocalypse in the traditional sense, especially given the theming doesn't fit the way a lot of post-apocalyptic stories are told.
Well, and then the big thing is that Phil Gaia um, built into the lore itself the changing world maps between each game. Phil Gaia is described as being in constant flux, so the entire reason of the game's maps changing is actually part of the lore.
More importantly, is the is in doing that. I know it's very tempting to try and tie everything together in a timeline of canon. But even though they're all taking place on this in a world with the same name, I think trying to do that is a bit fruitless.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. The tie-ins are mostly the names of towns and dungeons.
Mm-hmm. And the recurring hidden boss Ragu o Ragla. Those anybody who's played a console style RPG in their life knows about the rule of hidden bosses. That is, challenge them if you dare.
Oh, I would argue that Ragu is no tri-ace boss.
No, I'd say he's closer to Omega Weapon.
And even then, some of the weaker versions of Omega Weapon, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's ways to if you know what you're doing, there's ways to cheese Ragu. But saying that it's not as hard as a tri ace boss does not mean it's easy.
I mean, at this part, this is where we could subvert our own low bar and say high bar.
Yeah, because
Tri-ace bosses are dicks.
tri ace boss. Would it be fair of me to compare tri ace bosses to in are the RPG equivalent of SNK bosses?
Um, and the hidden bosses of Dark Souls games and no, better. I would say Tri-ace bosses are much like the Demon Flames at the end of Sekiro.
I can go with that since that is definitely going to be a with the amount of build up for it. There's a very at your own risk vibe with it.
Mm-hmm. It's a Tri-ace bosses and the like will test everything you have learned over the game rigorously,
Including your patience.
Indeed.
Especially your patience.
Ragu is not that, but it's still a fun boss to fight.
Yeah. Also, there's a couple things that I think really help Wild Arms stand out at the time. One of them was having a demo in the '97 issue of PlayStation Underground.
Mm-hmm.
The other is the fact that it was of a significantly higher quality than than Sony's previous RPG entry at the time, Beyond the Beyond, which has been my whipping boy for years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything against Camelot Software, except for that game.
Camelot usually made some pretty good games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's look at what was it? Golden Sun?
Yeah, and for the West, Beyond the Beyond was the first RPG on the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a year before Wild Arms. It is
Beyond the Beyond was
not good.
Was a thing. That certainly was one of the games ever. To use that meme.
But I'd say one of the other things that, of course, having a Western aesthetic is going to stand out, and I'd say it even to this day, it's something that stands out.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't bring up Wild Arms without bringing up the scoring by Michiko Naruke, who would go on to compose the music for all but one of the games in the series. And
Michiko Naruke has a great composition style.
mhm.
If you've been watching since the pre-stream, you even got to hear a little bit of it.
Yep, that was Into the Wilderness, which was the opening theme for Wild Arms. And well, her most recent work is
Eiyuden Chronicles.
Yep, with Motoi Sakuraba, who had the unfortunate pleasure of being the composer in Beyond the Beyond.
But also the fortunate and distinct pleasure of being composer alongside some other greats for some Tales of games, including the original Tales of Fantasia with Shinji Tamura and Ryota Furuya.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it looks like he's partnered up a lot with Shinji Tamura over his career. So you know that we've got people who are big names in their own rights across different areas teaming up to do stuff. And I'm still looking forward to Eiyuden Chronicles. I'm hoping it'll be very nice. I'm just the timing of Eiyuden Chronicles and the Suikoden remakes seems a little
sus.
Seems a little close. Just a little.
Yeah.
Side note, though, other things that Motoi Sakuraba has composed for in recent games, Smash Brothers Ultimate, obviously, since they have a ton of his tracks on the crossover stuff. Tales of Arise, Valkyrie Elysium, Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Oh, and Sacrifier. He's also composing for Sacrifier, which we've looked at in the past, Monk, and really like and want.
Yeah, it's on my short list, and it'll probably end up in my massive ass library when the time comes.
This man has stopped being so picky about his games, mostly because he gets a ton of bundles. I grew very picky very early on, so I avoided his issue. He has over 2,000 games. I got around 700. Mm-hmm. I'm picky.
For me, it's just a case of the mantra that I've had since I started this channel: expand my horizons.
Mm-hmm. And I can do that by sailing the high seas. And then if I like it, I purchase it.
Yeah, but one other thing that ended up becoming a staple throughout the series that was introduced was the almost Zelda-like approach to dungeons. There's been a fair amount of puzzle work in dungeons and RPGs over the years, but
I want to say that the greatest dungeon solving puzzles, in my opinion, when it comes to classic console RPGs, Lufia games.
I can agree with that. Although I think Wild Arms, with the tool system that it has, it can come pretty close.
Yes, absolutely. There's a reason I gave so many qualifications. Classic console type RPGs.
Yeah. And
because current Lufia makes me sad. Regardless, let's return to Wild Arms.
Yeah, the other thing is the fact that how the games have handled the traditional MP approach.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of games, first off, MP was only ever used by casters, or in some cases, you had set MP rates. Whereas, no matter what level you are in Wild Arms, its equivalent force points is always from 1 to 100.
Yep. A very distinct way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, the you have there's one of the, in some cases getting it to 100 is a good way to get rid of debuffs, since once it's maxed out you're at condition green.
Condition green.
Mm-hmm. I will note that it can be tricky to go back into the games, because the translation over the years was spotty.
I mean, it's a lesser known RPG series, technically. One that wasn't competing, or I shouldn't say wasn't competing, one that was trying and not succeeding at competing with prevailing trends among RPGs. So its translation work would not have been the best. I mean, even the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy VII at the time had the infamous "This guy are sick" line, among other things.
And to be fair, the translation team for the first game composed of 7 people.
Oh, it sounds like a Woolsey team. Nice. For those unaware, and unaware that many of their favorite Square RPGs of this SNES and NES libraries were translated by one man and sometimes a team with him. And I say "and sometimes a team with him" because on the smaller RPGs, Ted Woolsey would have to translate everything by himself in a matter of months. You can see why there are certain games that you may love near and dear to your heart, such as A Secret of Mana, that are missing 2/3 of their story. Well, their side stories. The main story was mostly preserved.
Yeah.
So a team of 7 people for a massive RPG, especially since this was on the PS1, so the disc opened up a bunch of space to do a lot more stuff. It's not a good thing. Never a good thing. There is a reason why these days, especially with Square, we commend their translation teams, is that their translation teams have actually been made robust and given direction. Thank you, Koji Fox. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing that I always found interesting with the whole force point system was that you obviously had the spell equivalents, although everybody had it differently. In the first game, Rudy would use spells for different arms. Celia obviously for crest sorcery, and Jack for his fast draws. And once again and if you've seen Jack, once again we have a character who utilizes who has a long coat and utilizes a quick draw technique.
I wonder what many different westerns they stole that from.
Well, there's that and the fact that is it any surprise that was one of the designs that I latched onto at a young age?
No. Considering how you dress now, definitely not.
The funny thing is, in some of Jack's art, he's shown with a sword, and in some of it he's shown with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
But truth be told, most of the stuff you're going to get are swords anyways, especially at higher tiers.
Which is sad, because knives can be so effective as weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Never underestimate a good knife, people.
Given the backstory with him, there's an understandable thing, and Something that I do commend the original for doing that was certain that had to have been a ballsy move is not having a large cast of playable characters, but focusing entirely on three.
Yeah, that was a smart decision. Absolutely. That would have definitely facilitated their their focus.
Mm-hmm. That those three, of course, being Rudy, Cecilia, and Jack. Um, and the thing is that each of them have their own baggage that they're trying to overcome.
Yep.
With Rudy, it's the fact that even though he tries to do the right thing because of the stigma with the use of arms, once people catch wind that they can use arms, he tends to get run out of villages.
Yep.
Um, with Jack, there's a lot, there's a lot including the fact that he's essentially a knight from a fallen kingdom. I'll phrase it like that because there's a lot of stuff I don't want to spoil, and with Cecilia, it's been a lot of it comes from her the desire to live for herself despite the fact that she's a princess.
And it's like only Rudy is someone who doesn't come from nobility or something.
No, but that's because what. But Rudy has his own issues beyond that.
Oh, I know.
Mm-hmm. Um, and the other thing that makes this important is what would be a staple for all but one of the games is essentially pick essentially going through multiple prologues for each character.
Kind of like the Saga games, if anybody's ever played those, especially Saga Frontier.
Yeah. Now, granted, Frontier goes with full on episodes for each character. In this case, we just have a prologue.
I understand. That's why I only said kinda.
Mm-hmm. But the big reason for the arm stigma is the whole legend of the metal demons, and a lot of people believing that arms are drawing from the same thing, and having or using one is a bad omen.
Makes you no better than the metal demons themselves in some people's minds.
Mm-hmm. And the when it came to the first game, like I said, it was very good. Though a bit of a habit that can happen with the games is you think that the story is reaching a natural conclusion, but it turns out there's more to the story. That ends up happening like twice.
Yeah, there are Billy Mays moments, but wait, there's more.
And even with that, obviously it was successful enough for a sequel, and this is where apparently the divisiveness starts between where I stand on the series and where other people stand on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because Wild Arms 2 is one of my favorites. It's between 2 and 5 when it comes to what I consider is my favorite entry in the series.
Mm-hmm.
But for two started to introduce a significant amount more um, sci-fi elements as well as technology and even cybernetics.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. But some people say that it abandoned the Wild West themes. It really didn't.
The Wild West themes just evolved into Weird West themes, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of had to, because you couldn't do the exact same thing a second time around.
Well, not to mention the fact that if this is the same world, the same Phil Gaia as the first game, and time has passed, technology is naturally going to evolve,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have different elements arise.
Yeah, but this is oh, but instead of going with the two D aesthetic on field and the like, two decided to do a 2.5D of having polygon environments, which some people liked, some people didn't.
Polygon environments with sprite characters is actually something that happened a lot in that era.
Yeah, it's that's also why it's kind of amusing when you contrast that with the graphical setup that Final Fantasy VII and now at the time 8 did by world by only using poly environments in battle scenes and world maps.
Mm-hmm.
Although, speaking of world map, there is one thing that some people really don't like that I didn't mind, and that is the fact that you actually have to go out and find settlements, dungeons, or whatnot using the search system.
Mm-hmm.
Some people really don't like it. I don't mind it because for one it could be a bit ridiculous. It's a way to make sure that you're actually paying attention to the text that a PC or NPC says.
To me, it didn't mind me because I'd been through other games where you had to discover things on the world map yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Not the least of which being 13th Act.
Yeah.
Oh, that game.
I honestly think that issues like that, or the movement system in towns and the like, it's only really gonna bug you if you use Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest as your benchmark for how these kind of games should work.
Basically, if you want everything to fit one specific type of RPG mold.
Mm-hmm. Now, there one of the big things that, of course, happened in from 1 to 2 is that whole stigma with arms being an inherent danger doesn't happen as much, and how um the protagonist in the first one, Ashley, is it uses an oversized bayonet and is originally just a soldier among a small group of soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But with two, this was where you had the introduction of the concept of Phil Gaia as a dying planet.
Yeah.
But you still had the concept of that choose your own prologue. It's just that you had a different set of characters, and you would get more characters as the story went on, to a total of 6 party members.
Which is still a nice small number.
But I mean, you have Ashley, who it's said that the manual describes his weapon of choice as a large bayonet, which is technically applicable.
I mean,
Although looking at it nowadays, what I keep getting flashbacks to a gun lance.
uh, mm, um, I mean, if we look at his weapon, it's a rifle with a giant knife attached, Monk. That is absolutely a bayonet. Though I'm pretty sure since they knew they were going to be competing with Final Fantasy VIII, we know why they really did it. I'm dead serious. Also, 6 party members here, 6 party members in FF8. Need I keep going?
I think you've made your points.
They just wanted to have the protagonists at least partially match, so people would make the comparisons.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say if there is the theme about preservation of the environment to an extent, as well as moving past baggage in the first game. But I'd say the bigger theme with Wild Arms 2 is the nature of heroism.
Yes. Also, can we please point out that that there are some supporting characters that it make clear how big into Western comics some of these games are.
I'm assuming you're talking about
Tony Stark and Scott Summers. These motherfuckers.
Well, if Final Fantasy is gonna have Biggs and Wedge,
yeah, but they've had that since like the beginning, Monk.
and where do you think they got? They've had it since 2, and where do you think they got it?
I know, Vixen Wedge.
But I look at that as a case of wearing one's influences on their sleeve.
Oh, I know. I had to point it out.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Stark and Scott Summers.
Yeah.
Iron Man and Cyclops are here. Who needs heroes?
Although, given the state of things, maybe they'd end up fighting each other.
That would also be hilarious.
Mm-hmm. But of course, the other two that you get prologues for are Brad Evans, who is the tanky boy and is a war hero that's treated as a war criminal. And it's not like and the thing is with him, there wasn't anything bad that he did. It's not like he was a war hero who went crazy or anything. It's just whether you're treated as a hero or a criminal is dependent on the side you happen to be on.
Mm-hmm.
But he is listed as being 6 feet 6 tall.
Yep, he is as tall as we are, Monk.
Mm-hmm.
Which means it'd be nice to have a scrap with him.
Yeah. But he tends to be the heavy arms of the group, to the point where his first force ability is lock on.
Mm-hmm.
Which Accelerator and lock on are two of the abilities that are kind of staples throughout the series. Accelerator guarantees that you always act first, and lock on guarantees a hit.
Yep.
Depending on the game, it doesn't guarantee a crit, but it's hard to miss with lock on. Of course, the other major one is Mystic, because item use tends to be single character,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're using Mystic, in which case you can use it on all allies. But of course, the third is Lilka, who's Lilka's not as strong of a character as Cecilia is. There's a granted, part of it is due to her being significantly younger in appearance and attitude, but she
She's
has
also
a
she's also short, so
yeah,
I mean,
she has a little she has a little sister complex, i.e.
hmm
that because her sister is Elenak witch girl, and she tries to keep things upbeat, which is necessary given how dark of a story Wild Arms get. I mean, very early on, we're dealing with demonic possession and people turning into monsters.
hmm
So a bit of balance is necessary. Uh, but the other three that showed up throughout the game was Tim Rhymeless, who is your summoner throughout the game, and Canon, who is a bounty hunter whose most of her body is prosthetic.
and
And
it's very clear who she's inspired by. Look at that cloak. Look at that single arm that is much more different from the other arm, and even the golden shoes if they aren't if they are even if they aren't pointed. Red eyes? Mm-hmm. Well, dark red eyes, I should say.
yeah,
Check. Hello, Rule 63, Vincent.
and I rem- but that I don't want to go too far into Canon's backstory because, like I said, the story can get kind of dark, and Canon's story is probably the darkest of anyone in the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the last one is Marivel, Marivel Armitage. You were talking about Tony Stark and Scott Summers, and you didn't bring up Marivel being one letter off from Marvel.
I am. I think that that's probably a translation issue
That
because,
is a possibility. Translation was a bit spotty because
well,
the translation was not handled by SCEA for two. It was handled by Agitech,
mhm.
who don't have the best track record.
Well, and remember that the original Japanese was Maria Bell,
Mm-hmm.
but um, I'm going to call this person out for a different reason. Monk, red eyes, blonde hair, short lolly. It's just following most of the immortal lolly memes that have been around for since time immemorial. If Nisiosine had been writing back then, I would say that this is a Monogatari ripoff, but it can't be.
And she's technically referred to as a Crimson Noble, but for all intents and purposes, the Crimson Nobles are vampires.
Yes, they are absolutely the Wild Arms take on vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Which now makes me think if Nishio Ishin did this because of if Nishio Ishin made his character Shinobu based off of this game. That would be hilarious.
Uh, incidentally, when we've talked about opening themes.
Mm-hmm.
Wild Arms 2 had two of them. The first one is the one that always sticks in my mind. That being, "You Will Never Be Alone Again."
Mm-hmm.
But you know how I talked about bad timing. Well, Wild Arms 2 came out the same year as Vagrant Story.
Oh, once again, going up against what was quickly becoming a monolith at the time.
Yeah. Wild Arms 2 came out in September 1999 in Japan and May of 2000 in the States. Now, granted, this means it did beat Vagrant Story by a few months, but the original Wild Arms beat Final Fantasy VII by a few months. Same point still stands, and Vagrant Story is one of the few games to get a perfect 40 from Famitsu.
Yep. Vagrant Story was a very, very popular. Very, very good game, too. I suggest everybody play it, even if there are improvements that could be made if a remake was made. But once again, this is a case of coming up against your monolithic older brother, Square Enix. Or in this case, Squaresoft, because they hadn't done the merger yet.
Yeah. I've seen some say that having the villain faction being a terrorist organization called Odessa doesn't have as much of a ring as
Metal Demons
as the Metal Demons. I don't quite agree with that.
I don't agree simply because you want the same bad guys in every game? You really want to be that unimaginative and stupid?
Given the advance of technology from 1 to 2, using the whole idea of the Metal Demons just wouldn't work. Granted, the twists that happened in Wild Arms 2, some of them do feel a bit ass-Polish, especially in regards to let's see to Irving Vold Valeria. And the amount of I don't want to spoil, but he goes into a lot of 4D chess. Especially since instead of the funny thing is that they kind of do the thing of the big bad being right in front of you for most of the time, because early on there's talk of how a demon called Lord Blazer, aka the Blaze of Disaster, almost destroyed Filgaia, and would have if it wasn't for the Sword Magus.
Yep.
One who you eventually meet, but she doesn't. But even though she's been put up as this legend, she doesn't see herself as such.
Probably because she doesn't think of herself as legendary.
No, she sees herself as a girl who got lucky. But what's interesting is that she's accompanied by Lucide, the Guardian of Desire. Now, the Guardians are Wild Arms' equivalent to Eidolons, and unlike say Eidolons or Summons or Aeons in FF, their appearance and their attitudes are very consistent. They are the overall guardians and the closest thing to gods on Filgaia, and help preserve it.
Yeah.
And but of them, Lucide is an interesting case, because in the first game he ended up he was the one guardian who turned against the others in the first war with the Metal Demons. But Lucide is not what I would call evil.
Oh, from the name alone, it makes sense of what it is. I'm sure Lucide would get along well with Larfleeze.
Not entirely.
Oh, I know.
Larfleeze is obviously, well, he's the he's Agent Orange, the embodiment of absolute want.
Hmm.
But I'd say Lucide is aggressively neutral.
Yeah.
He only wants to see very strong desires carried out, and usually will attach himself to someone who has that desire. In the
Hmm.
first game, that was the reason why he accompanied Boomerang,
Absolutely.
because he Boomerang just wanted a good fight.
Yep. Which is why you fight him 3 fucking times.
And even after he supposedly dies during his last second face turn, there's the implication in the description of his weapon that he'll be back.
He always is.
Of course, the other one that you fought a bunch of times who was a bit of a laugh is Zed, who could be considered the comic relief.
Hmm.
Es- especially since the times where he does show up to pick a fight, he ends up getting his ass kicked hard. But when it came to two, um, the initial group that would become Arms, which Ashley was going to be a part of, gets used as as a demon gate experiment, and Ashley would have fallen in with it if it weren't for him making contact with the sword Argathon,
Yep.
and in the process being able to take on Lord Blazer's powers through his level 4 force ability access, which is where he gets his Night Blazer form, which she's once again I'm making did what did
What?
did fucking Kamiya play Wild Arms growing up?
Um, maybe. But I mean, let's be honest here, Monk. Super forms are not unique to, well, any game by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but you can't. But it's hard for me to deny that Access does come off like a devil trigger,
Hmm.
especially the design of the Night Blazer itself.
Yeah.
Although once again you have a bit of interesting translation because one of his abilities is referred to as Hot Fencer.
However, you can get that changed.
Yeah, you can. And I've mentioned in the past that um Wild Arms, Final Fantasy VIII, and Chrono Cross all played an integral part in how I see game design, and a big part of that is, for one, this was my entry point to the series. Two, with each of the main characters, the way that they use their abilities and the way that they acquire them is different,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that would be carried outward in future entries.
Hmm.
Um, Ashley, because of the fact that he's using an arm, he can upgrade its stats more with a greater degree of control than other people. Uh, Although to a point, because you can only upgrade it to level 10. Lilka had the whole thing with crest sorcery, which is going to be the which is putting crest cards on a 4x4 grid, and that's the
Hmm.
main way you're going to get spells. You're not going to get them any other way.
Yeah.
Uh, Brad Brad obvious Brad ha- Brad obviously has the heavy weapons, and in a lot of cases you've got to find them. Uh, with Tim, well, his whole thing is guardians, so self-explanatory on that front. Canon, it was it was a random chance, because there's a whole lot of locking mechanisms within the cybernetics in her body.
Hmm.
And although Marivel, I don't recall what her setup was, especially since she's kind of an optional character.
Sort of.
But she's also the one who's going to have ties when it comes to golems, because that's another major theme, is these big ass golems that are about the size of mecha. But
Hmm.
it's important to note that it could be easily described they could be easily described as as well as giant ass steam steampunk robots, more like steamjacks on steroids than any sort of mech.
Hmm.
Especially since one of them, the Earth Golem Asgard, um, it takes a lot of coaxing for him to get up from his sleep, because his mindset is humans are still going to fight each other, so why should I care? But he did end up having a pretty good arc. Um, but the the big bad that it tries to build up ends up showing up after Odessa falls. That being this dimensional encroachment called the Kuiper Belt.
I believe that's the Kuiper Belt,
Kuiper Belt.
based off of the actual Kuiper Belt of in our solar system.
Mm-hmm. And the idea is sound, but it is a bit of an ass pull, because up until this point there's no mention of it, and then all of a sudden, after Odessa is taken care of, there's talks of this stain in the sky.
So we have a Final Fantasy IX final boss situation. Got it.
I'd say either that. No, I can't say it. I can't say it's like Necrom, because you at least see the stain, and its gradual encroachment of Filgaia. So in reality, it's more somebody was taking notes from the appearance of Meteor in 7, if we want to go that
Ah,
route.
okay. I
But
see what you're saying.
like I said, it was 2 got average scores. Um, and of course there was the fact that it was compared to both Vagrant Story and, of all things, Alundra 2, which I don't know what when it comes to major competitors, I'm not sure why Alundra 2 was brought up, because
Alundra 2 isn't even the same. Isn't even like. I might be the puzzle solving in Alundra 2.
they were both made by Matrix Software, but but there is such a massive difference in style between Alundra and Alundra 2.
Mhm.
both style and also the sense of humor with the games. There are obviously some humorous moments with the original Alundra, especially since the localization was handled by Working Designs, who really should get their own episode one of these days.
Very
B-
true.
but Alundra 2 feels like a fantasy comedy a la the more comedic moments of Slayers.
I can see your comparison there.
Even though it is technically it's it's considered a sequel in the sense that the same teams worked on it, and there's some overlap, but one of them is clearly more remembered than the other. And that's saying
Aye.
something coming from me because I should hate the protagonist of Alundra because he's an elf.
Hmm. When even the elf bypasses your racism.
But it would be quite a while before we'd get. I was gonna say it would be quite a while before we'd get enough before Wild Arms 3, but it was only a gap of about 2 years.
And once again, their release timing could not be worse. Because this time, they didn't beat their competitor to the punch, but their competitor released probably one of their biggest blockbuster games ever.
And one that I'm assuming, of course, you're referring to Final Fantasy X, which would go down as one of the top 10 best PS2 or PS2 not RPGs but PS2 games in
Yes.
terms of sales.
Yes. In fact, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy X was released in December of 2001 in North America. Wild Arms 3 was released in October 15th of 2002 in North America. Yeah, it's a 10-month gap, but that's not going to be enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're within the first year of Final Fantasy X's Zeitgeist Revolution? Nah.
And it is amusing that in Europe it was published by Ubisoft. Which we've already covered them, but there were a few ballsy moves that 3 did. One of them was I guess they felt they had to go back to basics, involving a smaller, more focused cast, and and trying to emphasize far more of the Wild West motifs.
Mm-hmm.
In this case,
As you
quite
can,
literally, because the opening scene is all about a train robbery.
not to mention every fucking character is either dressed in Southern Belle clothes or dusters,
Mm-hmm.
or a poncho. I can't forget the poncho.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think when it came to the design, that back to basics edict, they may have overcorrected.
I mean, the main party still looks really good.
Oh, they do. I still love the designs. Um, especially Clive.
You would like Clive. Glasses and a duster and a sniper rifle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all still small compared to us, though. The closest to being our height is Gallows.
And I'd say Gallows is all right. Um, I've seen a lot of people try and say that Jet was an edgelord.
How can he be an edgelord when he's just a fucking android?
An android whose original name is Adam Cadmon.
God fucking damn it. No one understands what that means, do they?
I
Probably
do.
not. Well, I'm talking about anybody listening to us, Monk. I don't have to ask about you. For those of you unaware, Adam Kadmon is one of the names of a physical form that God takes in Kabbalic mythos. It's a combination of man and woman. There's actually a picture of it that you can see in a lot of alchemical texts, and it's supposed to represent the perfect being.
Mm-hmm. Which we saw in there's also been some translations of it being the primordial man.
Yeah. Although it makes sense that you find out his name is Adam Kadmon in a place called Deus Ex Machina.
That too. But truth be told, um, with Wild Arms 3, there's two things that stick out to me. One of them is the fact that it's relying far more on on its on its narrative than any strength of mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And two is the visual style that it's going with. I think they figured that they couldn't out graphic their big brothers, so
Of
they
course not.
decided to double down on the visuals by not only going with a bit of a cell shading motif, but also putting a filter on it so that it looks like it has a kind of an old film reel look.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that it did that I thought was really cool that I don't see a whole lot of games do sense and could only really be done in a game where everybody's using firearms. You can in most games you can get some sort of transportation for rent, or later on get an item where you bypass the whole renting transportation, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
chocobo rental or a rental car or whatever vehicle is apropos for that game. The story remains the same, and
Mm-hmm.
usually the advantage is that you don't have to deal with encounters on the field when you have this.
Yeah.
You can rent horses in Wild Arms 3. But what's interesting is that combat encounters can still happen, but unlike some where it's just treated as a standard field encounter, no, you're doing the encounter while riding on horseback.
Yep.
It's a little thing that really sticks with me.
They just wanted to make you do Sunset Riders. That's all it is.
I'm not complaining.
I never said you were.
But from this was also the first introduction of the vitality system, which would make its appearance in future games. The idea of vitality is a kind of regenerating health pool that you can dip into.
Yep.
It recovers your HP to max after battles, but the only way for it to refill is by taking a spot at the inn or setting up camp. Once it's
It's
one,
just,
Go ahead.
it's essentially the some of the health pouch mechanics found in other games. I would liken it to if we're going to use PS2 era games, I would liken it most to the life pouch from Okami, which technically gave you extra lives rather than refilling your health between battles, because battles were mostly taking place on the open map in Okami. But you could just fill it up by getting foods. Not exactly the same, but very similar.
Yeah, and of course, that doesn't mean that you're just cut off from healing when vitality runs out. It's just that you're going to be relying on items from then on. and
Yep.
and you know how certain pundits will talk up on end about about the lack of proper female characters in video games. I
Yeah,
al-
the ones
I
that we
always
all make fun of.
mhm. I always laugh when they forget that that Virginia is a thing.
I always laugh when they forget that any female character is a thing.
Yeah, but the I'd say of the but as opposed to the previous characters, Virginia ends up coming off the youngest. I don't think I don't think she was younger than she's eight. She starts out at age 18. I don't think she's technically younger than Rudy.
No, she's in the same age group.
Yeah, but she definitely her
Acts
youth is
younger.
more in attitude.
Mm-hmm. She definitely acts younger. That's true.
And has a bit of a hero worship about the idea of drifters, especially given her the relationship she has with her father.
Mm-hmm.
And and really the concept of being a drifter in the landscape would be, I'd say, would be one of the major themes with 3. Now, three was not a bad game, but the reason why I don't rate it as high as 2 or even 1 is because there's a bit of a sense of been there, done that with some aspects of 3.
Yeah.
And not in a one for one sense, but in kind of the approach.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since the there is still there is the presence of metal demons, specifically Siegfried, i.e., the one who wouldn't fucking die.
I mean, if he's the one who wouldn't fucking die, imagine that he's here in another game. Oh my god.
Well,
Oh no.
you kicked his ass twice. Then he shows up a third time in the first game. Even if it was all part of a massive ploy by Al Hazred, Al Hazard, who was the real villain.
Mm-hmm.
But there is
Siegfried is
also
just one of those.
mhm. But there is also a significant theme of trying to restore Filgaia.
Mm-hmm.
And well, the villains want to restore Filgaia, but the methods are questionable.
We will restore Filgaia, but at what cost?
Mhm.
Is what that essentially boils down to.
Yeah, or the Futurama gag of they will learn our peaceful ways by force.
Basically.
Oh, and I will note the other thing that kind of holds it back for me is this was instead of a variety of advancement setups,
Mm-hmm.
you have the whole thing of advancement and just the expanded kit being dependent solely on guardians that you affix to characters.
Mm.
Now, you do still have the arm customization because, well, everybody has an arm, but because of the fact that there's not a whole lot of um, character specific abilities, that a lot of it is based around casting.
Mm-hmm.
You oddly enough have a similar problem that I have with the materia system in 7.
Okay,
Okay.
I can see what you're saying.
Oh, it ends up and what it ends up making and the problem that I have with it is the disconnect when you have four characters who are using different arms who aren't able to feel distinct because of that medium system.
Hmm. I see what you're saying.
Now yes, the some of the first tier FP abilities that they get are different from each other. Virginia gets Mystic, Jet gets Accelerator, Clive gets Lock On, and Gallows gets, I forget the name of it, but it's basically the magic equivalent of Mystic.
Um, I think uh, it was extension.
Yeah, basically did the same thing as Mystic, just with spells. Because of the fact that Gallows is a member of the Baskar tribe, he's meant to be the best. He's meant to be the best spellcaster, and
That's
the
why he also
best.
has summon, I think.
Um, everybody can do some bit of summoning. He's just better at it.
Yeah.
But again, the problem is the individual characters aren't allowed to be as distinct.
Hmm.
Contrast that with, say, just the original trilogy, the original Trinity in 2. You're not neither None of them are going to be overlapping with each other,
Hmm.
either in kit or abilities. But by making everybody a Gish, you make people less distinct.
Yeah.
And at the time, this put me in a bit of a hot seat because I was having this problem for quite a while and there was this argument that this was a good thing because unlike games that use a class system, it's not as linear or constricted. I don't agree, and I even to a point I see this nowadays. I've joked about how fans of GURPS or Hero will say that it's better because you have complete freedom to customize a character,
Hmm.
which you do, and I don't have anything against that on principle. But you have to acknowledge that it comes with a cost.
Yeah, there's a cost to all compromises.
It also makes things a whole lot harder to balance.
Very true.
I know some people say that balance isn't necessary. Yes, it is.
Tell me balance isn't necessary, and then go and try play Final Fantasy 14 back in 2016.
Or hell, tell me balance isn't necessary, and then go play then go for a naked run in in any Souls game.
They're possible. You can do them. I've done one. They're just, extremely fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a self-imposed challenge, though. So
Yeah, the much like going through Resident Evil 4 with just the knife.
yeah, fuck that challenge. I'm never doing that one again. Fuck that.
Neither am I. I did it once just to say I could do it. I had a playtime that was like 8.
Abysmally high.
Yeah, I think it was 100 hours long or something, and that was
Yeah.
enough for me to say nope, not doing that again.
Yeah, it's no fun.
Uh, but I'd say, but let me check the dates on something. So I would jump right into 4, there's one other game that came out in the PS2 generation that I have to get to before I get to the Black Sheep. That
You're
is
talking about Alter Code?
yeah, which is an enhanced remake of the original and kind of does what a remake should do. Now, obviously, Square has had this particular concept down pat for years, but
Although, I'm going to point this out once again to everybody out there. What you think is a remake and what Square thinks is a remake are two different things.
mhm.
If you're looking for an updated game with a new coat of paint, Square calls those remasters. For better evidence of this, you merely have to look at Final Fantasy X 10-2 HD Remaster or the Pixel remasters. When Square Enix uses remake, it is not the same thing, a la Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Mm-hmm. Whether or not you think the term should be used a certain way is irrelevant. That's the method that they're using. So when in Rome, you do as the Romans do.
Not to mention here on the Monastery on the GeekWatch, we do remakes constantly, as you should know. The reconstruction series of videos.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a remake. Yes, to reconstruct something is to remake it.
You can't argue the literal sense in one way and then argue against it in another way. Can't have your cake and eat it too.
Indeed.
But originally I had thought that that Alter Code F came after 4. That's not the case. That's just in the order I ended up buying them at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It did for whatever reason the North American version did get a bonus DVD that had the first episode of Twilight Venom, the TV series.
Probably to make up for the fact that there was no goddamn voiceover in the English version.
Yeah, this is a weird thing where there were I think it was dubbed in the Japanese version, but for some reason wasn't in the stateside version.
Yes, the Japanese version absolutely had a voiceover. English did not.
Mm-hmm. And it does expand in the it does expand the story in certain aspects, as well as allow for more playable characters. It also changes how several characters ended up playing. In particular, Jack's quick draw skills level up through use, a lot of Saga games.
Mm-hmm. And Rudy no longer uses anything but an arm for battle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same arm for battle every time. You have to upgrade his cartridges to make it more effective most of the time.
Yeah. You also get some of the other prominent characters in the first game showing up as either permanent party members or guests.
Yeah.
Calamity Jane, Magdalene Hartz, Emma Hetfield, Marielle, and Zed. But Marielle is made into a kind of blue mage, although one of her abilities, when combined with the Gatling raid for Rudy, breaks the fucking game.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
It does use a similar graphical style to Wild Arms 3, but for whatever reason they decided not to use the cell shading or the filter.
So really, it's just the actual basics of it that are the same.
Yeah. I like it, but I know some people don't like how the music was handled, where some of the mixing is a bit off.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the U.S. release was postponed a bunch of times until it was finally released in 2005, and had a limited release and was barely advertised. I think I only knew about its release because of the fact that I was reading like 3 or 4 different gaming magazines at the same time around that time.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'd say one of the other major changes was the introduction of the personal skills system, which we would see later on, but it provided a bit of control um, when it came to the advancement system.
Mm-hmm.
And the th- apparently it and 4 were announced around the same time, but they weren't released around the same time. I do I will me I did mention my preference for Alter Code F when we talked about non FF7 PS1 RPGs in the early days of GeekWatch.
Yep.
I do maintain that.
Both are good. I think playing both gives you a good feeling of how things evolved.
Mhm. And
But I think we've belabored the point enough, though, Monk.
yeah,
Time to rip off the bandage.
so Wild Arms 4, the game that for years I jokingly said was supposed to be Cyber Arms, but was called Wild Arms for marketing.
Mm.
4 is the black. Despite some of the introductions it made, 4 is the black sheep.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, myself included, it is the worst entry in the series. It people talk about some of the Wild West stuff departing in 2. 4, it decided to go strictly more modern. I can see some of the Western aspects with 4, but a lot of the designs feel like they would not be out of place in Tales or Star Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
especially Star Ocean. And it came 4 came out in 2005 in Japan and 2000 and early 2006 in the States. I don't think it had the timing issue, mostly because in this case it had bigger issues.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but and once again we do have a 4 character focus, and since it didn't decide to do the doubling down on Guardians from the previous entry, you'd think I wouldn't have as much of an issue. But there's a couple of things that I have much bigger issues with. One obviously is the look. Two is the fact that 4 feels a whole lot more linear in its design compared to the previous entries and even what would come afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of the dungeon exploration feeling more like a poor man's platformer than what came before.
Yeah.
Especially since they decided to use, instead of having Accelerator as a combat ability, Accelerator is now bullet time for some reason.
For whatever reason.
Uh, and the story did try and go for what was supposed to be a coming of age story. I think I think it overplayed its hand.
Yeah.
And of course, the the uh, the other problem is a lot of the setup feels straight science fiction instead of the genre mixing that had been done from day one.
You mean like the fact that ARMS users are called gene drivers?
And the arm in this case is a nano cluster that takes different forms.
Well, one of the ARMS.
Hmm.
You're talking specifically about Jude's shapeshifter, right?
Yeah. Uh, there was also the whole thing of um, the force gauge being a shared thing,
That was kind of like really weird, to be
and
honest.
now the big claim to fame that 4 had was the introduction of the hex system. The idea of playing on a set of hexagons, usually arranged in a circle. In fact, always arranged in a circle.
Yeah, it's a center hexagon with 6 hexagons around it.
Hmm.
By the way, the hex system has a dumb name. It's actually another um, abbreviation. HEX stands for Hyper Evolve Crossfire Sequence. The X being the cross in this case.
Yeah. I think I've played so many console style RPGs that I'm just used to dumb acronyms by this point. And given
I'm
the
always going to call them out though.
and I can't without being a bit of a hypocrite, given the Magi system that I wrote.
Not to mention, Wild Arms 4 had a few issues. Uh,
You talking about the freezing?
well, that among other things. Just noted on the wiki itself, in the North American versions of Wild Arms 4, 2 monsters, the Dalawa Bunny and Accident Rabbit, were taken out of the game, but not dummied out of the monster list, making it impossible to finish the game at 100% complete. The PAL version also has an error and is known to has the same error and is known to crash in certain places in the game when played in 50 hertz mode, leaving those areas potentially impassable to players whose television does not support 60 hertz. Some PAL copies also have another issue where triggering specific material summons would freeze the game. A workaround is to disable the battle movies in the game's option. Bug affects both PAL and NTSC modes. And the English localization copy is known to freeze when loading the area at the top of the ladder at the Great Stairway, roughly 5 hours into the game when played in PAL mode. The workaround is saving the game prior to getting to that area, loading the game in NTSC, going past and saving on the world map. No other areas are known to have this problem.
Hmm. I do have to wonder if 4 was a bit of a rush job.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Well, and there's also this stuff about the title and acronym. The fact that Arms in Wild Arms 4 is not capitalized on the main title cover was bringing the debate back to the title, and Exceed Games, who was responsible for localizing, placed a capitalized Arms on the back cover and inside the manual. And the reason for this was a copy editor from Exceed relied heavily on fan sites such as RPG Gamer for their localization attempts for the American version. This error does not appear anywhere else, nor does it actually appear within the game itself. Um, there's some shit. I think this is back when Xseed was just starting up too, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had previously they had I think around the same time they had also handled stuff like Shadow Hearts from the New World.
Wild Arms 4 was their first thing.
Yeah, I had the timeline messed up, but that definitely makes
A
makes
lot of sense.
hmm
Yeah, if Wild Arms 4 was Xseed's first. Wild Arms 5 was its sixth. So it having issues on those two, well, makes sense. They got better.
Yeah. Of course, you know how we talk about the issue of doing things again. Once again, we have the main theme of people using questionable methods to try and repair the damage done to Filgaia.
Yeah, that's
In this
That's
case, damage
trudging.
after a world war.
Yeah. That's trudging the same places we've been. I'm not sure I like that. Oh wait, I'm definitely sure I don't like that. No, I didn't play Wild Arms 4 at all. It doesn't exist. I skipped it entirely.
I didn't because somebody had to bite the bullet and
Oh, Monk, you were supposed to call me out as a liar right there.
um and admittedly I do have a soft spot for the weapon of choice for Raquel Applegate.
The
A
sword.
a sword with with a extendable handle so it can double as a spear.
Ah, so a trick weapon. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know. I was just saying the sword because, well, you and I in swordsmanship.
Yeah, but
Um,
one particular issue that would crop up when it came to the way the hex system worked that 5 definitely fixed was the relationship between actions and movement.
mm-hmm.
In some case, for everybody except Raquel, you could not move and attack.
Which was stupid.
Yeah, you had to pick one or the other. And the reason why that can be a problem is in order to do elemental stuff, you'd have to be standing on certain hexes.
Yep. It was stupid.
And the other reason it's a problem is the more reliable way to get to have spells affect everybody is for the party to stay in the same hex, because in the way that this is set up, you can have allies and enemies sharing hexes. The downside, of course, is that if they get hit, everybody takes the damage.
Yep.
Which I don't mind that on principle, but combined with that action economy problem, it becomes an issue.
Which is why it was better in Wild Arms 5.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be hearing that a lot, people.
Yeah. Speaking of which, 5 was the last entry on the PS2, and it was kind of their going all out moment. I'd actually compare 5 to in this regard to say 6 or 9 in the sense of trying to go all out before with this end of a particular era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously not saying it's as good as 6 or actually it's probably better than 9, so let me correct myself on that front. Yeah, I said that, but in terms
9's a good game. But, not the greatest.
Mm-hmm. And because of the fact that they have that I'd say 5, if anything, feels like a refined version of what we were seeing in 2.
Yeah, they just flipped it around and made a better game. That's all.
Mm-hmm. With some of the stuff that you would see later on.
They just flipped the 2 around to a 5. They were waiting. They were biding their time, Monk. Now it makes sense why the games between were or
Yeah, and you do you do have a race relations theme with 5, especially with the relationship that humans have with the Varuni who landed on Vilgaia a century ago.
Is it a century or 12,000 years ago? Because if I remember, the Varuni were originally from Filgaia.
Oh, it's complicated. but
True.
but you end up having you end up having a total of once again 6 characters, 7 if you count Asgard, but I don't.
And neither does the game.
No, but but it's not like you don't have. It's not like you don't have. It's not like you have a complete lack of control when it comes to Asgard.
True.
And
It's they clearly also went back to to roots a lot here because we have another blue-haired protagonist wearing a red scarf.
mm-hmm.
I'm
And
not saying
Dean,
that's a bad thing.
I'd say characterization wise, Dean is a better version of what they were trying to do with Jude.
Oh hey, they they voiced him with one of the most prolific voice actors of that time. Hi Yuri.
Maybe I'll if I ever meet Yuri, maybe I'll bring this up with him.
If we ever meet Yuri, I'm going to look at him and be like, how do you not have dissociative identity disorder at this point?
You know, I should have I should I could probably ask that with any of the voice actors I've had in the temple.
Crispin Freeman.
Crispin Freeman, get out of my bedroom.
Actually, let me do a quick check here. I need to check. I'm pretty sure that okay, hold on. Am I right or am I right? On May 18th, 2006, August 28th, 2007. Yeah, he would have been voicing both of these at the same time. I'm surprised he hasn't mixed up roles at this point. He technically would have been voicing Haseo and Dean at the same time, especially since he would have been voicing multiple parts for Haseo, not just with Rebirth, but the other 2 volumes as well.
Mm-hmm. It is a bit of a disappointment that Michiko Naruke wasn't able to come back for this one, but the opening theme, what they somehow managed to get Nana Mizuki to sing that. So fair trade, I guess.
I don't know if I want to call it a fair trade, but definitely a trade.
Mm-hmm. I'd also say that a lot of the other entries in the series try to go for a desert emphasis. 5 is probably the most colorful in terms of its biomes. I mean,
This doesn't surprise me.
which honestly I don't mind, because I don't think much like how you don't need a dystopia to do a cyberpunk story. I don't think you need a desert to do a western.
No, you absolutely don't.
And I do think it's to a benefit that you and I have have the background with these kind of games when it comes to examining genre, because of the fact that in a in a lot of Japanese media, and Wild Arms is of course no exception, the idea of genre as a monolith is not really a thing.
Yeah.
We brought this up when talking about Final Fantasy, but none of the entries in, I'd say the closest when it comes to the long running console RPG entries that has what could be considered a monolithic genre would probably be Dragon Quest, and even that is a stretch.
Hmm.
If only in the sense that it isn't that its genre is built entirely on the art sensibilities of Akira Toriyama. But beyond, but that's it. But you look at say Tales. I'd say even from the get go, I'd be hard pressed to call the Tales series high fantasy in the
Hmm.
in the traditional sense.
Hmm.
Um, same thing goes with Final Fantasy. Uh, and of course, some franchises like say Fantasy Star and Star Ocean are blurring the lines very intentionally.
Hmm.
You might be able to make the high fantasy argument with Valkyrie Profile, kind of. Yeah,
Mm,
like I said, stretch.
yeah.
And this is the reason why I think that criticizing the Wild Arms games past the first one for not being as Western is kind of missing the point.
Absolutely.
But getting back to five, um, I do the other thing is the fact that even though it is doing its own version of what we saw with mediums the with the medium kind of quasi class system that is in 5.
Hmm.
It doesn't bug me as much as what happened with 4 because there are ways for characters to stand out.
Yeah.
And Toku saying, I'll build your art sensibility on flash hair and loud yelling, good sir.
Leighton Gay, get in here.
Get your ass in here, Toku. I feel like you need a really strong magnet, or the beer signal.
I don't think a beer signal exists yet, Monk. You'll have to invent it.
I should I should have spent more time doing engineering.
Possibly.
But he's like, I have a gimmick I must abide by. Yeah, yeah, that's what you tell yourself. But you have first off, even though there's still MP, the force gauge is still unified, but its use is a bit more consistent.
Hmm.
Now, granted, I'm still not a fan of the fact that FP isn't used in the traditional sense, but I'm willing to put up with it in this case, since with 5, the force gauge is kind of meant to be the equivalent to a limit gauge. It's what allows you to do the fancier stuff.
Yeah.
Or does Elon allow that? What the fuck are you on about?
He's drunk, Monk.
Clearly.
I mean, when isn't he? But this is just him being very drunk.
But I'd say the other thing is the fact that that problem that I mentioned earlier about not being about having a really questionable action economy,
Mm-hmm. Is gone.
that was not a problem in 5,
Yep.
because I think they realized, yeah, that's a really dumb thing to do, so let's not do that.
Yeah, it was pretty stupid of them to do it in the first place, so they definitely got rid of it.
Mm-hmm. uh, of course, something that helps is that each of the playable characters have a certain core ability that they go with. Um, Dean does critical damage. Dean does double damage on crits. Um, Rebecca has multi attacks more than anybody else because everybody can have a degree of multi attack.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca just gets more of them. Avril has has a DP bonus for physical attacks. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Greg's whole thing, and I'd say we'd probably like Greg's approach of a sword shotgun. Um, Sometimes after attacking, he'll guard. Um, Chuck has more attack power proportional to his HP loss. Um, Carol can hit from any position, so there's your sniper.
Sneeper, no sneeping.
And as mentioned before, you have semi control over Asgard, but Asgard is not a playable character.
Yeah. That's why I said the game doesn't really count him as one.
Mm-hmm. Uh, of course, you can still customize them, which is for the best.
Yes,
Even if the
but
customization is a tile puzzle.
Wait, none of you have played the Mega Man Battle Network games? What are you talking about? Anyone's played Mega Man Battle Network 3, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep. But I I should note that the reason that one could because of some of the things we've said in the past, one could say why don't we have an issue with the racism allegories used in Wild Arms 5. The reason
Because
we
they're
don't,
not heavily ham-fisted.
yeah, it isn't yelling at us about about this having to reflect the world we live in today, or some shit like that,
It isn't David Cage making Detroit become human.
which was which was totally not trying to be a race allegory. Not at
Yeah,
all.
David Cage even said so. Not a race allegory. It's just about how we need to treat sentient and sapient beings the same as we treat any other sentient and sapient beings. You know, the entire underpinning argument of every race allegory. Not a race allegory at all.
Yeah. But with within the other thing is the fact that you even with those allegories you can still have that same story and just enjoy it as is without having
Yeah,
to think about the deeper themes or some video essayist gobbledygook.
yeah.
And I should I should I should also note that given how 5 was trying to pull out all the stops, it is a scavenger hunt of cameos. The only previous character who doesn't make a cameo is Lucide.
Which is weird
Well,
because there's even a theorized cameo for Lucide in a later game.
mm-hmm. Well, there isn't as much of an emphasis on the Guardian summons in 5 as there have been in previous games, so I guess that's why.
Yeah, I understand. It's just
But would it have killed you? Would have killed you to have it to have to have an NPC who has a dog named Lucide?
I mean, again, later game that might actually have an homage.
Yeah, and speaking of which, that brings us to the only spin-off that I actively acknowledge, that being XF or Crossfire on the PSP.
Mm-hmm.
And I should note the PSP is a for those looking for hidden gems when it comes to RPGs. The PSP is a treasure trove.
For those of you looking for some cool crossover Final Fantasy fighting RPGs, the Dissidia games are there.
Mm-hmm. And Dissidia Duodecim has an impressive modding scene.
The only mod I downloaded for Dissidia Duodecim was I don't know why they say duodecim. That's a diminutive, meaning 1200ths, not the 12th. Mm-hmm. The only mod I ever used for Dissidia Duodecim or Duodecim, however people want to say it, was the Rejap mod. The untranslation mod, mm-hmm. as some people called it, and all it did was restore the Japanese voices. And I was like, yes, I love this. Like, sure, Dave Wittenberg as Kefka is nice and all, but I love the Japanese voice actor. But that's Rails. And hello, Doku.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, hello. How are you doing?
Don't try to imitate Crony.
Don't compare me to that time controlling enchantress who is obsessive about. You know what? Never mind. I'm gonna get yelled at.
Only a little bit.
I mean, Crony. Your content is amazing, and also very angry, which I do approve of. I like the anger. The anger is a good thing.
You like the squawking. We get it.
No, the squawking is annoying. I mean, shit.
That's
like
right.
A rake.
Keep digging that hole, Doku.
I mean, she makes excellent VTuber content.
Including blending up sandwiches and drinking them.
Wait, hold on, pause. I know it's Rails, but Nani.
She blended up 3 different types of Subway sandwiches and drank them.
But why?
For the content. Not only that, when someone super chatted it, she mixed all 3 of them together, poured in some maple syrup, and drank that.
Oh, the poor girl. Goodness gracious. You know what? I take it back, Crony. I respect your dedication to the content.
And now we will return to Rails.
Yeah. So XF decided to do a interesting move, and instead of going with a traditional RPG approach, they went with a tactics RPG approach.
Oh.
Tactics RPGs are nice.
When done right.
Well, remember, this is the spin-off that Monk acknowledges as being a Wild Arms game.
Mm-hmm.
You mean the one they actually did right?
Well, the other.
The other one's a mobile game that shut down 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I stand by my statement. The one they actually did right.
Yeah, but Crossfire. Even now, there were no shortage of tactics RPGs on the PSP. But
Like the remake of the original Final Fantasy Tactics into War of the Lions.
which, as mentioned when the first time I talked about it, is better than the PS1 version.
Wait, I can hear it, Monk. The rabid Final Fantasy VII fanboys in the background screaming, "But Cloud's not in it as a game character anymore!" And my response is, I don't care.
Who the
And
hell
they have-
actually used Cloud late game?
No one.
And they still have everything wrong because you can still look at Cloud's bulge, but you still can't look up Tifa's skirt. Tell me I'm wrong.
I want to punch him.
Be my guest and get in line, Monk. How many spaces in the line have we reserved at this point, Monk? You and I are probably like the first 200,000 or 300,000.
Mm-hmm. But the big reason that I say that is if I have to give up Cloud to get a better translation, because let's be honest, a lot of translations of 90s RPGs weren't great. Then
while the PS1 RPGs had slightly better translations than the SNES because Woolsey was no longer being overworked and understaffed, it was still a rough time.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you say weren't great. He had never said bad, and he had never said acceptable, which should tell you everything you need to know.
No, they were acceptable. There were plenty of acceptable translations from Squeenix. It's just that they weren't all great.
Mm-hmm. And
I guess we'll go.
The translation for the reason why the translation for Tactics is a sore spot is because of the type of story that Tactics is trying to tell, and the way it is conveyed in the PS1 version.
Mm-hmm.
Keyword trying.
Like Tactics wants to style itself like an epic, but the way that the translation was written didn't carry that through.
Yeah. But, once again, returning to rails about Crossfire.
Yeah, Crossfire. I would honestly say that Crossfire is significantly harder than some of its contemporaries at the time, like the Tactics Ogre port or War of the Lions. Now some of it is due to the AP system that it used that basically acts like a stamina, so you can't try and needlessly overextend battles, otherwise you're going to take damage.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other things is that you know how there was the problem of moving or attacking in 4?
And how it was fixed in 5?
Yeah. You have something similar, but not quite as aggravating, in the sense that you can still do the whole move and attack, but unless you're at the highest tier with a lot of the jobs, there are some of the beefier attacks you can't do if you've moved.
Oh, so it's just Super Robot Wars then.
Once you get at the high end mastery of classes, that doesn't become a problem anymore.
Yeah, just like how in Super Robot Wars there's a spell you can get on most units that allows them to use all of their attacks post movement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of hate you for bringing up Super Robot Wars.
You can hate me all you want for it. It is still a fantastic series of games, and you'll never convince me otherwise.
I didn't say it was wrong, but I kind of hate you for bringing it up because it's correct. Now I can never unthink that. Thank you, Zen.
You're welcome. Not only do I bane the monk, I bane the Toku. This works.
Yeah, you've got 2 checkboxes you can mark off. You bastard.
I think I've baned at least half the monastery at this point, so...
But X now, if I recall, I do think Michiko did come back for actually no, I take it back. Um, the composer was Koda Masato, who had worked on 4 and 5, as well as Agematsu, who had worked on 5. But she did essentially do some guest work in the sense that the opening and ending theme were written by Michiko.
Yeah.
So it's not like she was completely written out. I think she was just I think Michiko Naruke was just harder to get to by that point.
Probably.
Uh, but there is a I'd say if I were to establish a theme, Crossfire has is themed more around the idea of the prince and the pauper,
Hmm.
especially since there's this idea there's this kind of switched identity thing going on, and even one of the tags is some lives are worth living.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, people who have played Tactics would be in familiar ground, especially with the class system and the ability to hire drifters to act as additional characters. But a lot of the story missions are going to be significantly unforgiving,
Hmm.
and I think the game knows it, because in a lot of those story missions you go through this lengthy briefing on the matter.
To tell you exactly how you should be deciding your tactics for that battle.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of some of the briefings on the harder Dynasty Warriors missions.
Yeah. The other th- but the other thing is that that stamina that I mentioned is how vitality works,
Hmm.
and it can make things worse if you're the more heavily equipped you are, because once it runs out, you end up taking a weight penalty in damage, but it doesn't kill you.
That's that's kind of fucked.
Like I said, I like XF, but I will acknowledge that it is not going to be a forgiving experience.
Which means it's not necessarily for everybody, but no video game is for everybody.
No. Uh, and even with that, some of the battles do have turn limits, and some are stealth, which is why I remember XF being divisive. I think it's you remember how I said that that some people whose only experience with this kind of game is Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest might have a hard time with some of the games.
Yep.
I think this applies just as much with XF, especially if your sole exposure is something like Tactics or even Disgaea, which are obviously doubling and tripling down heavily on combat, whereas XF sometimes treats its combat scenes as puzzles.
I mean, there are some combat scenes in Disgaea that are puzzles, but that's few and far between and only found in the item dungeons, really.
Mm-hmm. And and of course, some you do have. This is also the only time where you weren't exploring all of Filgaia. You were just exploring the kingdom of Elysis,
Hmm.
and I don't think it ran up against that much in the way of um of competition, but it ended up getting mixed reviews, and I think the mixed reviews were due to the fact that the combat system was not for everyone because of how it was set up.
Mhm. Let me see some things here.
But I will admit I did enjoy the class system that it had.
Monk, it did release against someone that would have stomped it into the ground.
What?
Within 2 weeks of it, in fact. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII.
And we go full circle.
March 11th, 2008 for Wild Arms Crossfire. March 24th, 2008 for Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII in North America. Yeah.
Well, you can't win them all.
Smart idea, guys.
Like I said, this is a franchise that has suffered from bad timing.
Like a rake. That's a like a rake moment, Monk.
I mean, if you throw a dart at the dartboard enough times, eventually you'll win.
I mean, it did even. It did
Just
the same.
one of those times.
It did the same thing in Japan too. It was a month prior Crisis Core in Japan, August 9th, September 13th, both 2007. It hamstrung itself. And it released after Crisis Core in Europe.
Like I said, you can throw a dart at the dartboard enough times. You just not always gotta win. They just managed to lose twice, which is
No, this isn't
impressive.
this isn't twice. This is like the fourth time.
Well, twice in this one release of this iteration. For the
Yeah.
entire franchise, have they won once?
I think only with the bad one.
You said it, not me.
Let me check. Let me check. No, they probably even lost with the bad one. Hold on.
I hope that's not true, because even then, my sarcastic ass can't help you.
Hold on. Hold up. Wait a minute.
Hold up. Hey.
I gotta.
No,
Did you know that there are so many games in the in the PlayStation 2 catalog that it requires 2 pages of indexing on Wikipedia?
that actually doesn't surprise me.
Okay. Other things that released around the same time as Wild Arms 4.
They have to win it at least once.
Time Splitters Future Perfect, which is a Western game.
Oh. Okay, fine, this isn't looking good.
And a shooter, so I'm
just comparing what's out around the same time that would compete for any people. Look. Mm-hmm. But if we want things that are similar to it, would the East games as RPGs cover it, Monk? Would Romancing Saga cover it, Monk?
Point taken.
Or better yet, at the exact same day as it, Shining Force Neo!
You know what? I retract my statement. It is possible to lose on all fronts regardless.
As for Wild Arms 3, because it's on the same page but a different date, right around it, Onimusha 2! Xenosaga Episode 1!
Oh. Oh. And this is why I don't bet.
They had this problem with every game, Monk. The timing was off, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. It didn't help that we're dealing with a span of time that was an incredibly full year for RPGs.
Largest RPG library and largest game library in modern day.
Hmm.
PlayStation 2, over 4,000 games.
Bro, you just had to wait like a month. Like, why didn't you
No,
just
they didn't have to wait Doku, no. Wild Arms 3, no matter when they had released it, and Wild Arms 4, no matter when they had released it, would have been set around other games from bigger blockbuster names. Period.
Oh, so
We
they were
already-
screwed regardless.
Yeah,
Uh,
but even with all that, one the a question could be brought up of with the fact that it was always overshadowed by those bigger games. Is that a detriment to the franchise? And I'd say no. It's just a case of it had been a good franchise that had the misfortune of competing with the best franchises
Yeah.
of its era. This will be the one NASCAR reference I'll make, but I treat Wild Arms the way I as the equivalent of Mark Martin.
Okay.
Mark Martin was a very very good driver in his day. The problem was he was very good at around the same time that Earnhardt was around.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't Earnhardt, then it was Gordon.
the thing is, you're not wrong. Was it good? Yes. The problem is, you're surrounded by people who are just as good, if not better.
Mm-hmm. Slapshoes has done a more detailed documentary on Mark Martin, but the point still stands.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, it's relevancy.
but even with that, it is kind of amusing how this franchise that was overshadowed still resonates with people. I had people giving some very strong thoughts with regard to Wild Arms when I mentioned I was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is due to the fact that Wild Arms managed to scratch an itch that a lot of people didn't know they had. And there hasn't been anything since that's really tried to scratch that same itch. Largely because well, a lot of RPG design first off has had a trend chasing problem for the bulk of the 7th generation. And secondly, there's the fact that, as mentioned earlier, a lot of people seem to treat genre as a monolith, or even as a series of great walls. And you're not supposed to cross the streams, and you're not supposed to cross genres.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think all three of us find that rubbish. I know Zan and I find it rubbish, and I'm pretty sure you do as well, Doku.
Oh no, there's an RPG that has particular type of play style and a particular type of visual style. We have to adhere to that, and we can't break from that particular type of established. Oh no, yeah, no, it's trash. If it's good, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but no, you don't have to do the same thing over and over and over again.
It's less of the same thing over and over, and more of the idea that um you can't that if you're doing a high fantasy story, that it has to be done this way, and you can't integrate elements from other genres.
Mm-hmm.
Again, oh no, we're doing a high fantasy story. How dare I incorporate someone who's a mecha that's not an elf? We have to have elves. No, I can do a high fantasy story that doesn't have elves, period.
Suddenly, Talos Lanta entered the chat.
No, Monk, better yet. suddenly, and I mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, 13th act entered the chat.
But of course,
Either way, my point stands.
I would be remiss if I didn't at least briefly bring up the anime series,
Mm-hmm.
which was known as Twilight Venom. Haha, Wild Arms TV.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I'm being honest, even the first off, I will admit I have a soft spot for it because it's another entry from ADV Films as far as its localization. At the same time though, it ends up reminding me of how really meh B Train was as an animation studio until they shacked up with Yuki Kajiura.
Mm-hmm.
Because the big problem they have with a lot of B Train's work is that stuff happens up until it's time to do the main story. Things feel episodic until I'd say the last 6 episodes sometimes.
Yeah, it's a marathon right up until it's a sprint.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can't. The funny thing is that when it comes to PS1 RPG franchises that got an anime adaptation, this was a case of history repeating itself because there was one other franchise that we talked about early on that got the same treatment. That was Arc
Mm-hmm.
the Lad.
Yep.
Although, if I have to compare the anime of Wild Arms with the anime of Arc the latter ends up winning out because it's just an adaptation of Arc the Lad 2.
Yeah, it's not something making its own story. It's adapting the game story, and it did it pretty well, I think.
Mm-hmm. And 2 is probably the best in that series.
I'm surprised you didn't bring up Rage of Bahamut or Grand Blue in that one.
Well, we're talking much older than either of those.
And I don't know if either of those were animated by B Train.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they were both done by CY Games because apparently CY Games has gone full Mad Lad.
Well, we know about Psy Games doing stuff for anime, don't we? Record of Ragnarok.
Yeah, but they're disqualified for this.
Oh, fair enough. Because I don't know what the hell CY is doing, but let's go from gotcha mobile game to anime because fuck it, why not?
We can't dismiss gotcha to anime as easily.
7 Nights Revolution.
I'm not saying to dismiss it. It's just CY took that idea and just went balls to the wall with it. Which,
Yep.
you know what? More power to them.
Mm-hmm. Also, I wasn't able to check if the anime openings for Wild Arms 2, 3, and 4 were handled by Madhouse.
I can check.
I know that obviously the first one was. I don't know if the ones for 2 and 3 were.
I can find out. It's not hard.
I seriously doubt they were involved with the one for 4.
Let's see here. Nope, it's only Wild Arms 1 that they're credited on.
Were you able to find out who has credit for the other ones?
I wasn't because I was looking at Madhouse's page, not at Wild Arms.
Oh shit. My apologies, Mildra and Zan. It has been fun chatting with you for the past 20 to 30 minutes. I have to make a fucking work phone call because fuck my life.
Oof.
By the way, cheers. Because I am going to chug this fucking beer before I get off the stream. Oh, why the ever living? You know what? Doesn't matter. Money is money. Mildred, cheers. Zan, cheers.
Peace.
Stay frosty.
It doesn't look like the people who made the openings are credited on Nope. Hold on. Wild Arms 3, Monk. You'll never guess who made the introduction and event animations. Never.
I feel a terrible disturbance in the force.
Well, it's good that you do because it's B Train. That was for Wild Arms 3. Wild Arms 4 doesn't show it. Wild Arms. I didn't see one for 2 as well, so. But 3 is credited with their opening and event animations being from B Train.
You know, in hindsight, that makes sense. When you made, I was half expecting that Studio 4C would show up because, especially in the 2000s, that seemed to be 90% of what Studio 4C was doing.
True.
But like I said, there hasn't been a game in the years since that kind of scratched that same itch. And obviously there was the mobile spin-off, Million Memories, and the only memorable thing in that for me is that the anime opening for that had characters from the whole series interacting, which leads to some interesting interactions, especially Virginia having to act like a big sister to Jude and Dean. Because I actually think Dean is probably the youngest Wild Arms protagonist.
Yeah, he's 13.
Mm-hmm. And which in that regard makes his story a bit more of the coming of age that Jude was trying to do, but didn't work, as I mentioned before. It doesn't exactly hurt that he's a much cooler pair of arms with the dual Fenrir. Even if it reminds me of Gungrave Overdose a bit.
Wait a minute. You asked if Dean was the youngest? I said Jude was the youngest at 13.
In that case, Dean's second place because he was 15.
16.
All right, I was 1 year off.
Yeah, I misheard you, and that's my mistake. I apologize.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the franchise as a whole, again having that element of Western, which is a genre that transcends certain regions. We don't have a fondness for Westerns because we're Americans.
No, that we have a fondness for Westerns because we like the idea of rugged individualism.
Mm-hmm. Chuck said it best when it came to the concept of the Western. It is the story of a man and a place, neither of which can be tamed.
Exactly.
And in the case of Wild Arms, that presence has always been there. But there's one other theme that has managed to stick a chord with me, especially with other stories that lean into the post-apocalypse. And this was something I hinted at early on, and I want to bring full circle with.
Mm.
Even in that post-apocalypse, even in the whole concept of a dying Filgaia, there is always the possibility of hope being able to and humans being able to renew it.
Yeah.
And having that kind of hopeful outcome puts it an outlier when it comes to the way a lot of people view the post-apocalypse.
Kind of like it's how nobody ever thinks of non-dystopian cyberpunk. But we've been over that.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure somebody's gonna yell at us in the comments about the specifics of that, as if we didn't make that clear. But
Again,
and I know some people might accuse us of tag teaming our detractors, but as far as I'm concerned, um, the Monastery is a package deal. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
not to mention the fact, I don't remember any of this ever being a one-on-one exhibition match. This is no holds barred, people.
Um, and more importantly is through that theme of hope. It's it's the it you end up even if you have a Filgaia that's mostly desert, there is always the possibility of being able to build it into something better. And I find that I enjoyed that when I was young, as opposed to a lot of post-apocalyptic kind of stories that seem to go with the idea of the world is screwed and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even post-apocalypses that I like say Fallout, have that same kind of cynicism.
Depends on the Fallout, but yeah.
Um, I will note I'm mostly focusing on 1 and 2 with that.
Mm-hmm.
One, the whole point is to try and fix a doomed shelter, and two is kind of all over the place, and the whole thing with the Enclave and all that. But I think you know it. I think you see where I'm going when I say that sort of cynicism is a bit possibly too present in post-apocalypses.
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned in the past that I have an interest in the idea of a post-apocalypse, for a better term, i.e., enough time has passed since the bombs dropped, proverbially speaking, that new cultures have sprung up.
Yeah.
Um, you kind of see this with Fragged Empire, but you also saw it to an extent in the original Nier.
Yeah.
And as dark as both Nier and Nier Automata can get, they also end on a somewhat optimistic note.
Always. Because Yoko Taro, I don't think, ever wants to end anything on a truly pessimistic note.
No, he's not. He's not early. He's not the early days of Gen Urobuchi.
Yes, bringing up the Uro Butcher.
I say early days because in his more recent work, he's not as much of the Uro Butcher as he used to be.
Very true. And I appreciate that.
I think it's more that experience has matured his writing.
I don't know if it's so much matured his writing. It's more, to me, it's more he's explored the themes that he wanted to with the darkest of the dark, and now he wants to explore something different.
Hmm. I can get that. I always exercise caution whenever someone's exploring darker themes, because you look too much into the abyss. The abyss looks back.
Yep, Nietzsche at least had that right.
I'd say if you want a perfect example of that, look at what happened to Frank Miller.
Ah, poor Frank Miller.
But
I feel bad for that man, to be honest.
and as far as I think as far as that particular chord, there have been some attempts of RPGs that lean into westerns, but the problem that I have with most of them is that they lean too far into westerns. I.e., they play the genre straight instead of playing around with it. Because I think what people really want isn't a Western RPG, but a Weird West RPG, which the bulk of Wild Arms certainly fits into, and stuff like Trigun also fits into.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the reason why as much of a fan as I am of Wild Arms, I'm not gonna tell people if they like that to try out Hard West, which is playing the Old West theme straight.
Mm-hmm.
Of course the difference in art style isn't going to help, and the same thing goes with something like Desperados. Um, Evil West, the upcoming shooter from Flying Wild Hog, that's a different story.
Oh, we'll definitely encourage that one.
Even we definitely will, because that is most clearly doing the Weird West aesthetic.
Oh, of course.
And I should note that I think the best way to define Weird West is taking the Old West aesthetic and putting some degree of fantastical tech, whether it be steampunk, dieselpunk, or something in between, or sometimes just throwing magic into the equation.
Or doing both,
Hmm.
which I think is what Evil West is doing.
Evil West is saying yes,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to the crazy ass weaponry that we saw in the footage that we looked at last month.
The Zapper.
That's the name we're going with.
It's not an elegant name, but it certainly describes what it does.
Hmm. And as far I have been asked over the years how I'd handle Wild Arms in tabletop form. A lot of people have brought up Deadlands as an answer. I don't think Deadlands fits.
I can agree.
The big problem is that Deadlands has way too much of a horror element to it.
Yeah.
It is Weird West, but there's too much of the horror, and in some cases gothic horror of of the Old West present within it to really work.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually say some of the more steampunky games would probably work better. Games
Yeah.
like Tefra, which I recently learned is getting a second edition.
Nice.
Possibly Westbound, which has the subtitle of Dust and Dragons, can work, as well as Volcania. And in fact, Volcania might have the best argument, especially with its more comic book approach to steampunk.
Mm-hmm.
And would it surprise you at all if I say that Volcania is another TTRPG made by Italians?
Nope. You seem to be very popular with them these days.
It's not like I tried.
I never said you did. I'm just saying you're very popular with them these days.
I would have said Iron Kingdoms, but Iron Kingdoms, you'd have to hack the shit out of that to make it work.
Yep. I apologize for the sounds in the background. Well, Amber alerts. You can't really turn them off.
And just for the record, Zan, I'm going to DM you the cover art for Volcania.
Okay. Ah, yep. 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 I like that. That's nice. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice, to quote Borat.
And I'll throw in this one for obvious reasons.
Yep, yep, yep. I knew why you threw that in. For both of the obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. But that is one angle, and that's why I am very glad to see that armed Fantasia is being developed. Now, yes, it was announced alongside Penny Blood, but while I do enjoy the Shadow Hearts series, I don't have the same level of attachment that I do compared to Wild Arms. The Shadow Hearts series are a good series of RPGs, but it doesn't have the same resonance with me.
It's just not the same, people.
As far as why one resonates with me more than the other, I can't quite explain.
I would make a joke, but I'm not sure anybody but you would get it. Blame the circumstances of your birth.
Fuck off. You are.
This time it wasn't even a black joke. Come on.
Yeah.
It's just a char ass nipple joke, that's all.
Mm-hmm. Now there obviously hasn't been a whole lot of footage for Armed Fantasia just yet.
But they did succeed at their Kickstarter.
And then some.
Oh yeah, I was very excited to see that.
So far, the only things that they've shown are field tests.
God, stop doing that, you dumb fucking phone. It is being dumb. I'm sorry.
Like this, they've shown field tests and shown some interviews. I will admit, it is a different approach, but I do very much enjoy the character aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Some might say it's modern-ish, but they have made it clear that they don't plan on doing a huge open world, which I think is going to be to their benefit.
Yeah.
But you probably already saw it. But when it comes to the protagonist, this is the main design that they have. Let me try and send it.
If you just have to send the link, send the link.
Once again, have I not made it clear that the lead designer likes the mechanic of revolvers?
No, you haven't said that enough, Monk. Not at all. At least they didn't go with a blue-haired guy with a red scarf this time.
No, we have a two-tone protagonist.
Not only that, he what's the word I'm looking for? He seems to be very cutting edge clothing there, from what I'm seeing.
I can see it to an extent, but it does look like Arm Fantasia is going back to the whole three protagonist thing, which given this being a kickstarted project, is going to be for the best. Don't
Don't
fall.
overburden themselves. Yeah.
I mean, actually, I take it back since some of the art has multiple characters, so maybe they want to go with something akin to two.
Maybe.
Uh, but for whatever reason, they've been very cagey about how combat is going to work.
Hmm.
In fact, a lot of the stuff that they've shown has mostly been exploring the fields.
Ah.
Although to the credits, even though there's a whole lot of desert, it's not like it's an endless amount of brown. In fact, it feels less like Australia and more like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
But it definitely sounds like their focus is more on exploring set pieces, a la taking the proper lessons from Half-Life.
Hmm.
And of course, I may be dead wrong about all of this.
Yeah, it's a game that's not out yet. We're making predictions solely based on some promotional materials. So if
And
we're wrong in the future, don't say we didn't warn you.
mhm. I do. I've made it clear that I do like to examine these kind of things and speculate on where things are going based on what is shown.
Yeah.
And I know some might say that say something like how much can you notice with just a trailer? Quite a bit, actually.
Yup.
And there it on their website they have posted up the full cast.
Hmm.
The main character who I showed you earlier, his name is Ingram Goodweather.
At least he won't be a fair weather friend.
Uh, we do have Alicia Fairhead. So you may have preempted yourself with that joke.
Yeah, but I said he.
Mm-hmm.
She might be a fair weather friend for all we know.
Yep. Uh, who, according to the site, is it wields spears.
Plural?
Well, spear type arms and shields.
Okay.
So she's a pokin' board.
Your favorite type, Monk.
Uh, then there's Euclid Sturges, who uses a staff type arm and seems to be the caster, as if his appearance didn't give it away.
Oh no, never, Monk. Why would they ever give someone's roll away with their appearance?
Uh, and
He's got to have the blue hair. Got it. Gotta have the blue hair.
but they've mentioned doing a system that they call cross order tactics, i.e. A lot of the tactics are about manipulating the action order, is what it sounds like, because they talk
That
about
sounds cool.
it sounds like somebody wanted to expand on the malleable action order that you see in Final Fantasy X.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's going to have its own tricks, but I didn't mind that turn system in 10 at all.
Neither did I. It was good stuff.
And as has already been made clear, Michiko Naruke is back doing full composition for this one, not just a guest piece.
Yeah.
So as and the reason why I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about Arm Fantasia at the end of it is to kind of bring things full circle. I mentioned the whole thing of there's always a chance with some degree of hope,
Mm-hmm.
and for a lot of folks, it seemed that after XF there would be nothing like Wild Arms after that, because Sony still owns it, and they're more interested in trying to make poor man's art games these days.
Don't get me started on that one.
But if I can't help but wonder if the success of Bloodstained has had a ripple effect among a lot of the old guard in Japanese studios.
That wouldn't surprise me, to be honest.
They probably got scared off by Mighty Number 9, but the success of Bloodstained has made them rethink things. Obviously, I don't have any insight on that. It's just a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But given the rants that we've had when it comes to people playing at cynicism, I feel like Wild Arms and games like it are a quintessential affair when it comes to the things we try and aspire to in the temple.
Absolutely.
And the chief among it is there is always the possibility for things to get better with some degree of hope. But if you play the cynicism game, nothing will ever change.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds a bit preachy coming from me, but it's something.
He's a monk. What do you expect?
I'm a monk, and sometimes monks double as priests. And this is my temple.
Indeed.
But that is going to do it for this particular episode of GeekWatch. Next week we'll have something that that is not as pandering to me, but is in something that we've talked about quite a bit. And I might even break out Voltaire for it. If you know, you know. And of course, I'm going to be just as busy with interviews this week as I was last week.
He never gives himself a break, people. Not unless we force him to.
Or my employers force me to.
Has that happened?
Yes.
We've got good employers.
Mm-hmm. But that is a story for another day. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.